What is good, my ex-homies? It is your boy Jacob Gooden, and we are back for another week of the Ex-Homeschoolers Club. Today, I'm joined by a brand new friend, my friend Julius, and we're going to touch on growing up in a big homeschool family, okay? Julius is one of 12 kids, and holy smokes, I can't even imagine the craziness that household must have experienced. But we're also going to touch on Julius's experience of having a dad who was a pastor. We're going to talk about going through high school during the COVID years, and just a bunch of other like homeschool shenanigan type stuff. But before we get into it, I have a favor to ask, and that is, if you haven't already, go subscribe on YouTube, okay? If you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't subscribed, what are you doing? Click that little button down below that says subscribe. I very much appreciate it. And if you're listening on audio and you didn't even know we had a YouTube channel, check it out. Link is going to be down in the description, or just head over to YouTube and look up the Ex-Homeschooler Club on YouTube. Subscribe, maybe watch a video or two, like a few things, scroll through shorts, feed the YouTube algorithm, and help me continue to grow our subscriber base over there. I very much appreciate it. Now, let's get into our convo with Julius. Well, Julius, welcome to the Ex-Homeschoolers Club. I'm so excited to be chatting with you today. Welcome to the club.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I've been watching your channel for a bit. Honestly, I think it just was recommended on my For You page. And I'm actually kind of grateful because, like, I don't know, it's fun to find like a smaller channel that you relate with. So, like, completely, it's just so funny. So I'm glad that was recommended. I don't know if I would have found the channel otherwise.
Hey, it means the algorithm is doing its job. It's putting it out there.
Right?
Yeah.
It did the work and it got it to the right person. Me.
Yes. Sweet. Well, I like to kick everything off. I'm just going to kind of turn it over to you for a few minutes. And like, I would love for you to kind of walk us through your homeschool experience, like, siblings and how many years were you homeschooled and, graduation, and like, just kind of give us like the overview, and then maybe also a little bit of like what a day in the life looked like.
So I had, there were 12 kids total, so I had 11 siblings. There were 9 girls in our family and 3 boys. And I was the 9th kid down the lineup. So I was very like towards the end of the family dynamic. I was very much a middle child in like all of the ways. So that was kind of like family situation. Like we grew up in like the countryside in California, and we we're very like to ourselves. Like we just did not have a lot of like homeschooling families or generally any like families with kids. Like there were like I would say 3 main families that we knew that had like kids, but there was just not a lot of people around us. So it's just like grew up very isolated, I would say. Um yeah, so that was interesting. And I would say a typical day in the life, it went through phases because there were months of the year where we would be like really strict with it, where we would be doing a like um like waking up at 7 and getting back to our desks by 7:30 after having eaten breakfast. And then there were also seasons of my life where it would be like I would wake up at 10, roll out of bed, get in like less pajama clothes, and then roll back in bed and do school for 6 hours and then be done. And like it would just go through phases of like my parents like caring levels, and also as I got older, like I was more in control of my schedule and like my schooling and even grading stuff. Like by the time I was a senior, my parents were like so hands off. I like did my grades by myself. I calculated my GPA by myself. Like it was just it was crazy. So at the end I was basically like teaching myself like fully, just completely. I taught myself algebra because neither of them were like none of them were like doctors. They both had like high school diplomas, but they didn't have like degrees in anything like school related. So they really weren't like equipped for that.
Right.
So I was like, I taught myself algebra and I hated it. I flunked. That was the only subject that I was ever like that bad at, and I got a B. That was the only B that I got in my like schooling. So I was like very good at school, and I still like school. Like honestly, it's I still like learning. I still do studying on my free time. I'm that homeschool kid who liked writing essays and
Yeah.
reading books and doing the book reports. Like I was that homeschool kid. Um, And I'm actually fine with that. I was like so funny as a kid looking back. Like I was reading dictionaries. I was so weird. I loved that little girl for being a weirdo that
Yeah.
she was. But yeah, it would just go through like phases of my parents caring a lot and then
Right.
not caring as much. And we used a Becca like all throughout.
Okay.
There was only like one semester where we switched over to doing paces. And that was the worst semester of my schooling experience. Um, I got nothing done, even in the subjects that I'm good at, which is like English and like history. I got nothing done because I could just not wrap my head around paces for some reason. I think it was because at that point I'd been using Abeka for about, I'm gonna say like that was around like eighth grade. So I've been using it from kindergarten up to then, and I was just like, I could not wrap my head around paces at all. Like I feel like it probably would have been fine if I hadn't been like raised on a Becca and used to that format.
So I also did grade a lot of my work and kind of like was
Yeah.
self-sufficient in a lot of ways. And you mentioned like even when you felt like in math with algebra, you were like, I'm doing so terribly. And you're like, I
Yeah.
ended with a B. Like that's a passing grade. And
I
I'm that
know.
way too, where like I was like, if it's not an A, like it's not good enough kind of a thing. And college was like my wake up call for me where I was like,
Mm,
oh, like my professor isn't mad that I got a B. Like, yeah, there's more work I could put into it, but like
mhm.
I'm not like I'm still gonna get a degree kind of a
Right.
thing. And I don't
Yeah.
know, do you think that that's exclusively a homeschool thing, or do you think that that's like a universal, like kids in general are just like we have to get A's?
I think it depends on the person, honestly. Because my sister, the first time that she got like a 70 on a spelling quiz, she like was sobbing. So I do think like in our family it was like promoted
Right.
like to get good grades because we wanted to prove that we were like good at what we were doing. My parents had like a lot to prove in that respect. Um and I think it just depends on the person because I've talked to like public schoolers who are like so intensely like I have to get A's or else it feels like my life is like crumbling. And then I've talked to homeschoolers who are like, nah, I got a C and I don't give a fuck. Like I just don't I don't care. Like I
Right.
passed, right? So I think it just depends on the person and the parents definitely. Just different expectations. Um yeah, it just depends on the person. But I was definitely like as I got like in my teen years, I was definitely like a lot more chill. But I feel like after like failing, well, I say failing, but really wasn't like, but after just like struggling with algebra, I was like, you know what? I don't care anymore. And I ended up like doing really well the rest of the time. Like I didn't give up, but it just wasn't as big of a concern. But when I was younger, definitely like a very big concern to like get A's and do really well. Um, so yeah, it just depends on like the environment, I would say, and the person.
So my parents let us like we could retake things. So if we didn't get the grade we wanted, we could retake it and do it
Yeah.
over. Did your parents do something similar?
They would, if we got below, I think it was even if we got below a 75, they would have us
Okay.
take it
Yeah.
again. Sometimes we would retake it if we got below an 80, even because we wanted a better grade and we knew we could do better. But they would let us retake things. As I got older, it was just like it got way more relaxed because they were on the tail end of their kids, like they were a lot more just like whatever about things, you
Right.
know how parents are with just like younger siblings, just a lot more leeway there. But then yeah, we would be able to retake things and get the grades they wanted. So yeah, just that would happen pretty often. um I can't think of any instance where like I got a low grade and I didn't have to retake it, to be honest. So
My parents, it was a lot more about like they really believed in like the mastery of stuff. And so for
mm,
math, for instance, even if we didn't retake it, my dad, because my dad was more of the math guy in the family, and so
yeah,
he would sit down with us and walk us through and be like, okay, like I need you to understand how this operates, right? And so, and he could tell, right? You struggle with like I didn't do super well in algebra. Geometry was more my thing. I could see it, right? I could visualize it, but algebra was just like. I mean, you're dealing with the unknowns and
yeah.
all of a
I
sudden
was so
letters
bad
are
at
in
that.
play. You're like, what the heck is going on? Um, And he would always remind me, he's, hey, there's levels of math where there's like literally no numbers involved at all. It's like all letters and it's just very hypothetical. And he's like, so that you can do this because there is like numbers involved. He's like, once we get into the hypothetical situations, that's where you're really going to struggle. And I'm like, okay, good to know. So it always made me feel better. But he took a lot of time to like sit down and be like, okay, it's about understanding the concept of it. And so
Right.
that sometimes it wasn't always about retaking it as much as it was just like, I need you to know what this is so we can move on because it's building blocks.
And I feel like with my parents, if they had the knowledge to like help me understand, they would have. Because for some things they really did like care a lot, and like I feel like they wanted that, but they didn't have the know-how to get me there on their own. Which is one part where I feel like they kind of like dropped the ball a bit in terms of like where they could have improved. Like I think they definitely could have done some like research or like tried to get their own degrees or just had someone else teach us, because like I feel like all of my siblings are brilliant, but I don't think it was because of their teaching. It was definitely like self-taught, or like we were doing our own research, or we learned it after, because like all of my siblings are really smart, but it just I don't think it was because of their like knowledge of learning, and
Right.
how and teaching and stuff. I really just think it was self-taught for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the age difference between your oldest sibling and then the youngest?
So the youngest right now is 13,
Okay.
and the oldest is like 35, I want to say.
Okay. So
Um,
yeah, big,
Big age
big. Yeah.
difference. My actually oldest brother has a kid who is the same age, like 4 months off, um, that as my youngest brother. So like
Okay. Yeah.
that's the age difference we're working with. Like he was married and having kids, but at the time that my mom was has having her last kid.
Yeah. So with a family dynamic like that, I know that because I'm a family of two kids,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
so yeah, we would help each other with stuff. And we have a 3 year
Mhm.
age gap, and so yeah, of course we would help each other with stuff. But I know in some of the bigger families, sometimes the older kids end up teaching the younger kids, and that gets passed down. Was your experience anything like that, where you're like, okay, like older sister is now like running math for me?
Yes. So my sister, who's 2 years older than me, taught the youngest brother how to read. That's the kind of thing that was happening. She taught him how to read. Like my like older siblings would help us do like with like classes. My older sister, who I'm living with now, like basically raised me more than my mom did. So yeah, there was definitely a lot of that. Like we called it the buddy system.
Hmm.
I think the Duggars also did it. So I think it's just a big family thing where like an older sibling like takes care of the one of the younger ones. And yes, there was definitely a lot of that going on between like my sister teaching my brother how to read. Like my siblings would show me how to do like the more complex math problems that they had already done, like
Right.
algebra and stuff. So they would do that. They would show us like how to do like diagramming and like grammar, stuff like that, like all the time. All the
Right.
time that was happening. Yeah.
Which can be both good. It's like a good bad thing in my opinion, where it's like it is nice to have those people in your life that are like a little older and they can like sometimes hearing from someone who's only 2 to 3 years older than you is that they can explain it in a way that makes more sense than like a parent can or a teacher can. um but then yeah, like you said, having parents who are invested in like their own education to make sure like you're getting a solid education is really helpful as well. And
Yeah.
so you was there like co-ops or anything that you were involved in, or like other homeschool families in your life that you guys piggyback off of each other, or was it very like we're our own thing and that's it?
Honestly, yeah. We were on our own for like the whole time. We did charter schools so that we could get like the diplomas at the end of like high school. But past that, like we were very like just we're doing our own thing. Like there were other homeschool families, but we were not like at all connected to them in the sense that they were helping us like learn or we were learning with them. Like that was not happening at all. And it just didn't happen. I don't know. I think my parents just wanted to be on their own for some reason. Although I would say that, but after I've moved out, now my parents are joining a co-op, like a homeschool co-op. And I was like so baffled by that. I was just so
Yeah.
baffled. I was like, why now? At the tail end of all your kids, are you now joining a co-op? That's just so weird. So I really don't get it, but no, not during my time. There were no co-ops. We just did charter schools. So we would like send in samples of like our work and we would get like the grades and like the backing, like the institution backing, to reflect that. And that was what we did all throughout my time.
When we chatted before, I had brought up that like I grew up very much involved in like the co-op
Right.
environment. That was like I think we were signed up for a co-op before we had even like started homeschooling. And so it was one of those things. And part of that had to do with my mom had friends who were homeschool moms. And so
Mhm.
she had people to go to when she was getting started to kind of be like, hey, like, what should we do here? And like, what has been beneficial for your family and that kind of a thing. But it also gave us an environment to like have community and community of
Right.
like-minded people, which like can be super important. You know, it's like yeah, I don't know. I remember I look back on my first couple years of homeschooling as being very isolating, and that had to do with I went to public school for 2 years, and so I
Right.
was used to classroom setting, 18, 20 kids. You know, we were friends, we play dates afterwards. To go from that to like everyday school is like me, my mom, and my sister. That's a very different experience for you. I mean, you were born and raised in it, so that's normal all the way through. Not to say it's not isolating, but it, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
but there's a difference there when you're like have experienced it versus haven't, you know. And so I
Right.
was just curious, like, yeah, if the co-oping thing had been a portion of that, what then was like socialization like for your family?
So I would honestly say socialization was just the church that we went to and nothing else. Up until I would say after COVID, then it kind of branched out a bit. Um, but it was still very church centered all the way up through my like teen years, until I graduated. Um, I think the most isolated though I had ever been was during COVID because then I was literally just at home all of the time. I didn't even have church at that point.
Right.
And I was like 13, 12, 13 when COVID like happened. And it just like that was the most isolated I've ever been. And before that, like the only outlet I had was the church. And it's just to have that cut off was just devastating,
Yeah.
unmatched. It was so terrible. Um, but then after that, like things kind of shifted to be more like like I got to be more outside of the house a bit more, because I was like babysitting and I was like driving and like I just had different things to do, so that was a bit nicer. And I was doing extracurriculars like horseback riding and ballet and jujitsu, um, for a bit. So I had like other outlets at that point. But yeah, during COVID, that was the most isolated I had ever been. But it's not to say that during like my younger years, I was not isolated at all because I remember like because it was a Becca, you would have like the classroom videos. And I remember wishing I was in the classroom instead of sitting outside of
Right.
it and like wishing I could talk to these kids and like just like wanting that so badly and like being like just so disconnected from it was like hard. I remember that being hard as a kid. Um, to not understand like why I couldn't be in the classroom with them was just like so strange, you know?
You know what's so interesting? So you kind of alluded to the fact that yeah, you're pretty fresh out of the homeschool world. And
Yeah.
not that long ago I had a friend who he's a little older than I am. I'm 29 and so he's in his 30s. And he did I want to say it was a backup, but it was but his was like tapes. So you put the tape in and watch the classroom and he described feeling the same exact way about watching this classroom of kids do their, you know, experience the lecture and go through class and do all the stuff. And you're at home just, you know, watching these people do it and doing your own worksheet, but
Mhm.
alone and wanting that, like, man, I just want to be in the seats next to them and that kind of thing. And so I find that so interesting because, like, I totally get that. I totally get that
Yeah,
feeling because like I was saying, like my first couple years of homeschooling where I felt that way, even though my video lessons were much more of like a lecture. I didn't see a classroom of kids. Like it was very just like some dude in front of a whiteboard, circling stuff. But I remember that feeling of just being like, oh, I just want to be around other people because that's such a crucial like developmental time for kids, right? It's like you're learning
yeah,
how to interact with other people and you're learning how to like, when to be nice and when to stand up for yourself and and what it's like to get bullied and what it's, sometimes what it's like to be the bully and all these different things. You're learning all of this stuff. And so I think that's one of the weak spots of homeschooling can be is like you take that away from a kid and so you have to supplement it like you talked about in high school. Okay, so after
yeah.
COVID now I have all these extracurriculars. Well, if you had had those as a young kid, maybe
I would have
maybe you wouldn't
flourished.
maybe yeah, exactly. Maybe it would have been maybe you would have not felt quite as like alone in the classroom setting because you're like, well, I still know that like I'm gonna go do jujitsu and Betsy and Susie are also gonna be there and and my friend Steve and Kevin like they're also gonna be there and we
Right.
can all
Yeah.
hang out. So so as you talked about after COVID, kind of getting into like extracurriculars, like what was that shift like for you? Because I'm not gonna say it was the first time you socialized, but it definitely seems like it was a key point in like really being like I'm growing up.
The biggest like thing is all throughout my childhood, I really wanted to do ballet. And so when I finally got the chance to do ballet, it was like I loved it so much. I still love ballet. I don't do it anymore because I don't have like the funding to do it. But I would still love to do it, honestly. And I remember just wishing I could do it because I had friends who did it and I just wanted it so bad. We were like so broke when I was a kid, we could not. But once we got the funding from the charter school, we were finally able to like join a class and like do recitals. And it was really awesome. Like I loved it so much. I was like getting to know people. I was getting exercise and putting passion into this thing that I'd wanted for so long. It just truly was like so like I am so grateful for that like moment of being able to do that. And then my first ballet teacher, she was like the first non-Christian that I knew on like a very, very personal level. And I like loved her so much. And I feel honestly a little bad looking back because I tried to like proselytize to her all the time just because I was like my mindset was if you're not a Christian, you can't be a good person. And she was like one of the first instances that I realized that was not the case. And that I realized that there were good people outside of my world like who are just living their life and being happy and like enjoying their time on earth. And I was like, that was like groundbreaking. And I know it's not that crazy of a thing to realize, but it was pretty crazy to realize
Yeah.
at age like 14, 13. It was pretty crazy to realize that and just be like, oh my gosh, you can be happy and fulfilled outside of the church and it's like perfectly fine. So yeah, that was pretty like big turning moment, like key um like thoughts and were happening then and just lots of changes were happening during COVID and after COVID because of where I was at like developmentally and then also just where I was at in life. It just a lot of things changed. Like pre-COVID and then post-COVID, like a lot of things happened to where I just went through so much change so quickly.
Well, if you don't mind, like talk a little bit about that. Like what were some of these shifts that were, obviously you talked about, okay, so first time not necessarily meeting somebody who's not a Christian, but having someone involved in your life heavily
Right.
who's not a Christian, you've seen them like, oh, this is a good person. This is a kind person. This is like a normal human being,
Yeah.
and that being impactful. But like what else was going on and shifting at that point?
Before COVID, about like I want to say 9 months before COVID, we my dad took a pastorate for a different church and we started living in two houses um and we were bouncing between them because we couldn't sell the one house because it's like historically important and then the pastor or I mean the like pastor house I don't know parsonage there's the
Yes.
word
Yeah.
the parsonage yes we also had that house. So we were bouncing from house to house, and I was doing school on the road a lot. I spent more time on the road than I did at a house, really, at that point in time. because we were just driving so much. Um, and that was a big change. Like changing churches and changing social groups was a big change. And then at that time, we also switched charter schools. Um, and that's how we got the funding to do like ballet and such. Was this different charter school that was offering like state funding, because as homeschooling has like gone on, it's gotten more and more funding, especially in California. Like you can get funding to do extracurriculars because of just people like advocating for homeschoolers. And I really do appreciate that. So yeah, but at that time, we switched charter schools, we switched churches, and like I was still with the same curriculum, but it was just a crazy time. And then COVID hit, and we were no longer going to church. So my dad had to like switch up his whole thing, and we were now like only at the one house most of the time, and we were like just doing school basically all the time, and we didn't have like a lot of we didn't have a lot of places to go because of COVID.
Right.
We were just really like stuck. And my dad was doing like pastoring like online. He would devote a lot of time to that, so he was like not around. I think that was his way of dealing with COVID. Um, Honestly, I don't even remember how my mom dealt with it. I just remember that it sucking a lot. Um, just because like everyone was trying to distract themselves because we were all in the same house. And at that time, I want to say we had 7 kids in the house, six
Okay.
kids,
Yeah.
maybe. I think 7 or 6. It changed halfway through COVID because one of my siblings left, I believe. Um, and that also was a big change. So I actually had 2 sisters leave like during COVID and post COVID, and that was a big change. Like becoming the oldest of the house was
Right.
a crazy change that also happened like in that span of time. So yeah, it was like a crazy time.
Yeah.
Because in those ages of like 11 to 14, things are already like changing a lot for you, like mentally and just like physically and everything. But then also having all of these external factors, like um just happening at the same time. It was a wild time to be
Yeah.
alive. I would say also internally, like that was the point where I was like questioning faith and like questioning my identity, and like realizing I was bisexual, and like all of the things were happening all at once. um and like there's a lot of internal things happening, like just earth shattering few years.
Well, I was gonna say, like, I was in my early 20s when COVID was happening, and like it was hard enough for me being 23, 24 when that was
Mhm.
happening, and like, so I can't even imagine being 14, 15, because I've been doing a lot of like retrospective on early teenage years and like the growth and all that kind of stuff, and so recently kind of put myself in that same mindset of you, thinking back to that time of like, okay, like things are changing, right? My body is just naturally changing, and then
Mhm.
like your sexual awakening is happening, and like you're starting to develop thoughts for yourself a lot of times of like
Right.
you're growing into adulthood, in a manner of speaking. And so like that's a big shift. And then you tack on, like you said, all these other external factors of
Mhm.
siblings leaving the house and COVID and mom and dad maybe not being available, or they're also struggling and having to deal, and
Mhm.
everybody's just trying to survive. Like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine. I'm sure it's like very, one, isolating, but two, just like I would assume it just feels like you're going insane at that point.
Genuinely. And I think that genuinely I dealt with it the best way possible. But at the time, I felt like I was crazy. Like you said, like I felt like I was crazy for like thinking these things and feeling so like it was just, it felt insane. It felt insane to go through. Yeah, and I think it's interesting to see how like COVID affected different people, especially in like different life stages, because it is such like a big thing that happened to everybody. But it just like yeah, it just is crazy how different people like went through it because
Yeah.
it was different for each person. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you talked about like kind of deconstructing your religion during that time, like I was doing something similar. And so like I think that it's interesting because the COVID was both a very busy time in a lot of people's minds, but it also was like this very like it was very still, at least for the first couple like months almost, because you're just like nobody knows what's going on. The world is
Yeah.
shut down. Like everyone's just gonna make sourdough and film TikToks, and that was like the thing.
Yeah.
But it gave people a lot more time to kind of quiet their mind and just like think about stuff. And so for me, I was like running through religion and what do I believe? Do I actually think that this is real? And if I don't think it's real, okay, what does that mean for me? And where do I position myself and all those types of things? So what like what were you what thoughts were going through your brain as you're like thinking about religion and maybe deconstructing or restructuring that in your brain?
Yeah, so I feel like the biggest issue in my early years of deconstructing was me being bisexual and attracted to girls and like knowing that I did not choose that, like just realizing it on a day, like a random day, and just being like, "Oh, what what does that mean now? Like, am I a sinner just inherently? Because I didn't pick it." And I was like struggling with that very deeply. Um, and I really just like my answer for it in the beginning was just to dive deeper and like be like, God, just take it away. I will do anything. Just don't like just take it away, please. I don't want it. And I did that for about I wanna say, like, a year and a half. I was really just, like, diving in, like, reading the Bible, I was praying, I was, literally begging God to just, like, have the feeling stop or just, like, have them just go away or, like, saying, "I'll never act on them, but, like, please, like, I don't wanna feel guilty about this," like, just bartering the whole time. And then around age, I wanna say, like, 14 and a half, I started coming out of that a bit and being like, "Okay, well, if you're not gonna help me, then I'm going to do my own research and do my own thing." Because I've always been, like, really into researching and analyzing things, and also, I've really been big on accuracy in the Bible and outside of the Bible. I just love being accurate and efficient. It's just something about me, I just love it. So at that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to find out what is accurate because if you aren't helping me, then I'm just not going to engage with this anymore. Really. And so I started because I knew what people would say post me becoming a Christian if I started by going to like atheists and like the intellectual thinkers who weren't Christian, so I was very aware of that during my deconstruction of how people would talk about my story after I came out of the religion. So I was very aware of that. So what I started by doing was by reading the Bible and reading basically all of my like theology books that I had, all of the theology books that my parents had, and I just like dove right in. And I was at that time I was taking like my own notes on like how I saw like issues with their thinking, like issues with what the Bible said, inconsistencies. I was writing all of this down and like taking it all in and like just absorbing all of this knowledge because I wanted to have a control over my narrative that I heard about other people not having. And I wanted that to be the case where I was like, no, I did study the Bible. And that was what I went to first. Um, and these are the inconsistencies that I found. And part of that is like kind of sad that I was so aware of what other people were thinking before it even happened. Um, but then also also kind of grateful for it in a way, because I was doing the best I could with the knowledge that I had, and yeah. So after I did that for about, I want to say like 6 to 9 months, probably maybe to a year, I started looking up like these issues I was having and studying the issues and going through the issues and realizing that other people before me, long before me, had had these similar issues, and like garnering the understanding of one, my parents are not infallible. Two, the Bible is not infallible. Like it's not. And just like just like getting to a point where I was like, okay, so I know that these things are not true. So now where do I go from here? Was the question. And it was a little difficult because I kind of just went straight into like, well, I just don't believe and I'm done. Like, and I just don't want anything to do with it. And I kind of sat in that for a little bit, but not honestly for too long because I still love like studying and I still love like just reading the Bible, honestly, because it's such an interesting book once you like put it in the perspective of like ancient people wrote this and it's cool to read things that ancient people wrote.
Right.
It's just a fun thing to read. Um, so once I got to like the point of like studying it again, I was like, okay, I still don't believe, but I'm appreciating the Bible for what it is as like a mythology book and like this history of people. And then I started studying like other religions and similar like experiences to mine, like Mormonism and extra Jehovah Witness stories and Catholicism and like just studying mostly those. Honestly, I am kind of bad at like reaching outside that scope because those are the ones that are so similar to my
Right.
experience. I'm trying to get better at that and like study more, but those are really similar to mine. And on it, obviously, I want to hear like everyone's story. So if someone were to come up to me and be like, "Hey, I was an ex like Muslim," I'd be like, "Oh, cool. So what was your story then?" Like I would love to hear it, but it's kind of I don't really seek that out on my own just because I'm still learning a lot about the ones I'm more into. And then also, I feel like even though there are similarities, I think the way that some religions are, it would also be a little triggering to learn about. So it would just depend. But yeah, so at that point, I was studying other religions and like just, I still didn't believe, I still don't. But right now, I would say where my faith is I don't believe. And if God were to prove himself to me, I don't think that I would instantly go back to being Christian just because of the things, if the God of the Bible, I should say, was to prove himself to me. I would have a lot more questions than answers to that because I would want to still ask, like, why is this the way that it is? And like, what are you doing?
I feel, yeah. I kind of have. There's two things that really stuck out to me with what you're saying, but the first thing I'm going to talk about is the like God revealing himself and like, okay, like if
Right.
he were to show himself, what does that mean? I agree with you. I have tons of questions, right? Because
Right.
if the God of the Bible is accurate, then like, yeah, why is there pain and
Mhm.
suffering and all of these things, right? And why is there hell? And like, there's lots of questions around those things. And there's obviously tons of theologians and great thinkers who have answered those or come up with,
Right.
theories about why that would be. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think I would have a lot of questions in regards to
Yeah.
that. And I don't even know that I would instantly go back either because,
Right.
I sit in a place of very, like, I call myself agnostic, where I'm like, I
Mhm.
don't know what I believe, or I'm like, some days I'm an atheist, some days I'm like, yeah, maybe there is a God, but I don't know which one it is. But I agree with you also on the looking at the similarity between certain religions, right? Like the Jehovah's
Mhm. Yeah.
Witnesses and the Mormons and even the Muslim faith, it parallels the Bible a lot more than
Yeah.
I grew up believing. And so looking at those stories, I think there's a comfort in it because you
Yeah.
like you see the similarities between those
Mhm.
as compared to something like Buddhism or Hindu or anything like
Mhm.
that, where it's like I don't know as much about those and I haven't done as much research about that, and I will get there someday. But it's definitely
Right.
it feels different in the sense of, I think the way that the church and the teaching is structured is vastly different. And so that's why I think so many people relate to, like we said, Mormonism,
Yeah.
and Christianity, evangelical Christianity, and Catholicism, and even Muslim, right? Is because Islam, because it's like there's a very similar structure to, there's a church and there's a service and you do all these things and you read these books and you follow these people, and like that's the way it works.
And there are like social rules too.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of social rules around how you act and what you do and what you wear, and those types of things.
Mhm.
The the other piece that really hit me with what you were saying was the the controlling of the narrative. And
Oh
when
yeah, yeah,
yeah, because I thought a lot about that as well, where I was like, well, I know what I believe, and it was shifting, and it was like I don't believe in the Bible anymore, and I don't believe in God anymore, but I can't just like state that. Like I didn't feel safe in
right,
just stating that because I was like, I know that someone is going to come along and they're going to be like, well, you were never a Christian. Okay, cool. Like that's, whatever, that's your thinking. I know the reality of what I believed, and things like that. But I wanted, like you said, I think it was less of it was a worry of what people were going to say about it, but it felt like people would then write my story for me. And
yeah,
that was what
yeah,
I was realizing, was that I felt like so much of my story had been written kind of by other people to some degree. And now I was like, this is the next chapter, which is by me. I'm the
mhm,
author now.
yeah,
And that, I think, was the thing that I worried about when I started to come out about it, because I was just like, no, I'm in control now. Like this is my story and nobody else gets to tell it for me. And so I was like, I have to have the rebuttals and all these things in place. As I've gotten older, I've been realized like I don't really give a fuck what anybody says. Like
right,
they're gonna
yeah,
believe what they're gonna believe, and that's fine. I know what I know about myself, and that's what I choose to show to the world. So anyway, but
yeah.
those things really resonated with me on what you were saying, and I wanted to say thank you for sharing, because that's, it's not
Well, and I
easy.
think it's so interesting to be so hyper aware of your experiences as you're experiencing it. And I think that's such an interesting aspect of what I was going through is I was hyper aware of reacting to my experiences as I was experiencing them. And that's just an interesting position to have yourself in. And I'm glad I'm not the only one who was like, I want to be in charge of what people say. And then
Yeah,
another thing is for me, if like they're going to try and like debate or argue, what keep coming back to is um like personal experiences are very important in testimonies for them. And if my personal experience is not good enough for them and I have to have like a dissertation on what is going on in my brain for them to like believe me and understand and be empathetic, then I don't really want to be having that conversation with them anyway. And we can talk about other things, and if they're not willing to talk about other things, then we don't really have to talk. Because if like personal experience is good enough for them for fellow Christians, then it stands to reason that my personal experience should be like have the same respect every time.
yeah,
And there are people who I know who are like that, who are still Christian, and like my personal experience doesn't negate theirs. And I'm still friends with them, and like it just depends on the person. So yeah, that's what I've kind of come down to is like it has to be enough and I don't have to justify myself to
yeah.
you.
No, that's a
Yeah.
beautiful way of putting it, Julius, because I definitely like
Mhm.
this year I've spent so much time thinking about this very vivid memory in my head of going to a church function and people giving their testimonies, and this one man had this wonderfully colorful testimony about being in Vietnam and fighting the war and being a drug addict and sleeping with all these prostitutes, and how God met him at a moment of weakness and pulled him out of that, and he changed and he became a better person. And like that's a beautiful story, right? That you can go from being kind of awful to being a better person. That's a beautiful story.
Right.
But yeah, my I always felt my story was not colorful enough to, I felt
Yeah.
inferior, right? And but to your point of like if stories and personal testimony is something that hinges a lot, on it's good enough for them, then yeah,
Hmm.
my personal story of being like, well, this wasn't great in my life. That should be valid to those people as
Right. Yeah.
well. And I think to be honest, I think that's a big part of why this show exists, is because I realized that I want people to feel comfortable sharing their stories, small, big, crazy,
Yeah.
not crazy, like down to the most minute, what
Hmm.
most people would think is boring kind of situations, like type of thing, and hopefully just feel like I can just share my story, because the human
Right.
story is, I think, one of the most interesting things, because every one of us, even though there's a ton of similarities between your upbringing and my upbringing, there's also a ton of differences. And and hopefully we can hear those and unpack those and come to common ground on some areas. And I don't know, I think it makes us better people and it makes life
Yeah,
more
yeah,
interesting when there is that variety of stories out there.
definitely. And I think when you get into this like place of sameness where all the people think the same, you suffer for it. Your brain thrives under new experiences and learning new things. And when you don't provide your brain that, it just you stagnate and you aren't
Right.
as vibrant of a person as you could be. And I truly believe that like new experiences and learning new things, I think everyone should do it. I think everyone should do it like almost daily if you can. Like just try something new. Like tonight I'm gonna make pizza all by myself because I've never done it before and why not, right? Just do something new and learn something and try to expand your knowledge. That's like something I've always been passionate about. It was one of the things that my parents like always would congratulate me on and just like really respected about me. And right now I'm not talking to them, but I still think that like if you were to ask them, they would say that like I do love to learn and just like that was one of the things that would they would constantly bring up. And I think a lot of people should like kind of get that passion within them and just like tear like just tear up the world and learn new things, you
Right.
know? Like I think more people should dive into that passion, honestly. It's one of my favorite things to talk about and I love hearing about people doing new things, even if it's very mundane. You know, I just love it. I love it. It's my favorite.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious then. So like, your parents congratulate and support like this study, this like, I want to learn new things, right?
Yeah.
But was there exceptions or guardrails to that? And let me give you a little bit of an example. So the town I grew up in California, was a little bit of a witchy town. We had some occult stuff in the area, and
Fun.
I started, yeah, and I started working at the local library. And the library is the hub of all knowledge, in my opinion. And
It is, yes.
and so I would reshelf books on the shelves, and there was all of these books about Wicca and all these things. And at first, I was just very like, just put them back on the shelf and walk away. And then eventually, I
Mhm.
got to a point where, not that I was checking them out, but I would just like flip through a couple pages and be like, I'm just intrigued by what does this mean, right? And maybe it was, I don't want to say it was dangerous because I now sit kind of in maybe a similar position of you. Like, I think it's just learning about stuff is very interesting.
Yeah.
But I started to pick up on things that it was like, oh, this is less about like summoning Satan and more about like
Right.
using herbs to like cure a disease or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
set an intention. But all that being said, I know for a fact that my parents would have been like, do not touch those books. There would have
Yeah.
been this guardrail of like, if I brought those home, this is not staying in the house more than 5 minutes, kind of
Right.
a thing. And so I'm
Potentially burning it.
right, potentially burning it, right? Yeah, there's going to be a strongly worded letter to the library saying, why do you have these things? Kind of a thing. But what, like, was there maybe that kind of a thing within your house of like, yes, like knowledge and learning is like important, but there's also, we don't go there.
They would say that they encouraged the learning and like but I would say that they would encourage learning so long as you reach the same conclusion as the Bible or as they had. Um and like there was very big like amounts of confirmation bias happening or just straight up like mental gymnastics to reach the conclusion that they wanted to reach or they wanted you to reach. And when that didn't happen, then it would be an issue. So they would say that they encouraged it, but truly they just wanted to feel like they had studied something so that they had like the high ground and so that they didn't feel like they had reason to be attacked. um and then in regards for you bringing up like reading the books about Wicca, that's so funny because when I like during COVID and when I was like 12, 13, and 14, I went through like a Wicca phase and like doing like practices for myself and like mostly they were like calming practices and like stuff and like charging crystals to like be calm. And it gave me something to do during COVID. But it's so funny that you bring that up as like one of the things that you did that your parents wouldn't have liked. Because I absolutely know they would have hated to think that their daughter was like, oh yeah, I am a practicing witch right now. And I was like I was when I
Yeah.
was 13. It's just like And I still kind of do some of those habits just because they're nice habits to do. I wouldn't say I'm practicing much, but it is like funny to think that um just like with similarities, just so
Yeah.
funny. And actually it's just so funny that the human experience is so vast but also so small at the same time.
Well, I even thought it was interesting. I went to Boston not that long ago, and if you take a train outside of Boston, you can go to Salem, Massachusetts,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
famously the witch trials and the witch burnings and all that stuff. And so, going to those museums and learning about what classified as a witch and learning about that, it's like, you know, we why do we view witches as like the green skin kind of a thing and like the super pointed nose and all these types of things? Well, you're talking about women who would live out in the middle of nowhere, were just exposed to the elements, and they would cook for themselves, and they were medicine women a lot of times, and they would go and they would create tonics, and they'd figure out, this root plus this thing makes this, and that helps, with a cough, or that helps with whatever. And so it very much was this naturopath kind of thing. And so I laugh because I think there's a lot of people still inside of like evangelical Christianity who are very like
Mhm.
naturopath, like, they're like, oh, let's just only use things from the earth. And I'm like, that's witchcraft. Like that's like the
Yeah.
basis for a lot of witchcraft. And so I joke with my mom all the time because she loves her essential oils. I tell her,
Yes.
I'm like,
Yeah.
that's your witch's brew right there, And so
My mom would be so mad at me if I said that, but you are absolutely right.
yeah, so I just think it's funny that we like look at these things, and sometimes we don't necessarily know the history of where these things come from, or like,
Mhm.
we just have a concept in our mind of what has been taught to us for many years and programmed into us, and of what this is and what it looks like, and drawing a pentagram on the ground and lighting black candles and
Right. Yeah.
summoning a demon. Well, that's maybe not exactly what everybody's talking about. And so I think, to your point of like learning about things and also being okay with learning about things that make you uncomfortable, oh my gosh, it will
Yeah.
open up your mind to so many things that it's just like, oh, okay, maybe this is just very different than I experienced. It also leads to the ability for people to then have conversation around it, and for you to feel maybe more comfortable going to somebody who is of a differing opinion than you, and actually
Yeah.
discuss it and ask questions and feel valid in doing that.
I love expanding my knowledge. I definitely think that that's a good point. Um, yeah. It's just it is funny because when you said that, I was thinking back to how my mom is very like naturopathic, and she's like all into like grounding and like essential oils, and she would rather you not go to the doctor. And then my dad, who is like kind of the opposite, where he's like very chill with medicine. I would not say that he is like down with medicine. Like he is not super like gung ho for it, but he is like when the vaccine came out for COVID, he was willing to take it. He was going to do it, and my mom was the one who was against it. So that's kind of like the dynamic there. So I kind of have like both. Like I kind of saw both sides of like the more chill with medicine person and the not chill with medicine.
Yeah.
Like as opposed to like taking ibuprofen for a headache, she would go say, "Well, here, have this essential oil, rub it on your like wrist, and it'll make you feel better." And I think that's just funny. Like I had those two sides of that coin, just
Right.
funny.
Again, it goes back to like learning sometimes the history of like where do these things come from, and I think it's important to understand where drugs come from and those kind of things. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting thing, like I said, to see all these evangelical Christians be like super into naturopath, but then it's like they're like
Yeah.
super against witchcraft. It's like,
Well, they're
well,
not witches. That's
sometimes
not
it's
what's going
kind of the
on there.
same thing. Yeah. um I wanted to ask you like to about your extracurriculars. You brought up like horseback riding and ballet
Yeah.
being a
Yeah.
big one for you, and this is obviously like a big pivot from what we've been talking about. But like, tell me a little bit about like those, and like, so was that with stuff like in the community, and less so of like, it wasn't obviously a co-op thing because you guys weren't a part of
Yeah.
homeschool co-ops at that point. But like, was there other homeschool families involved in that, or was it very like just, hey, it's a bunch of other kids in the community?
Right. So it was mostly just other kids in the community. It was not a co-op thing. But how the charter school worked is it had specific businesses called vendors, that would support the payment through the state, and they were able to go through that process, and they were like vouched for and all that. And those were the ones we would go through. And there it was still like very to ourselves comparatively, but it was like doing activities. So I only did jujitsu for I want to say like 6 months, maybe like maybe 9 months. A bit like it was right before COVID, so it was very like not very long. And then after that, I didn't go back. Um, but then horseback riding, I did for about 2 years, I want to say, and ballet I did for about three and a half. So yeah, before and after COVID. I did it. Yeah. And I really liked horseback riding. We had horses. We still have horses living on the property where I grew up. And only rode those horses once because they're super old. They're like over 25 years old, both of them. And one is a mom and one is a son. So, they're like real stinking old. Um, and so I didn't ride those very much, but I grew up around horses, so I was like familiar. And then so when I started riding, that was really nice just to like get that experience. I really loved it. Um, I didn't do any like competitions or anything. I was not at that level, but I would have loved to, like if I had
Yeah.
gone to that level, I would have done it. My parents probably wouldn't have been very chill with it because it probably would have been like on Sundays and stuff. And they were very big on not letting the extracurriculars mess with church in any way. Um, so yeah, like church came first in all of my childhood all the way through up. Like if you had the choice between helping with the church event or doing school, it was the church event. If you had the choice between doing an extracurricular or your own thing versus a church event, it was the church event every time. So yeah, the church was like more important than anything else, and sometimes even more important than me or other siblings. Like it was just my parents very much cared about that.
Do you think that if your parents maybe had been able to separate like the school from the church thing maybe a
Hmm.
little bit more, that it would have, I guess that's kind of hard. If your dad is the pastor, then it's like
Yeah,
it is kind
yeah.
of all entwined inside of itself. But
Hmm.
like I do wonder if there had been able to maybe be that separation of like, okay, hey, like school is important and this is the time, we allot for that and this is good. And then
Right.
like here's church and this is important and this is good. But there may be as exceptions. Do you think that that would have been beneficial, or you think that it would have?
Yeah, I don't think it could have happened in my family, but I think it would have been beneficial. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that oftentimes like school was pushed to the back burner for me and my other siblings, and then we were expected to pick up the slack. So I remember oftentimes, from even when I was younger, I would stay up late doing school, but not like that late. But when I was in high school, I would do all-nighters doing school because of things that would happen. And it was my job to regulate my schooling. And I would sometimes like spend a whole day working at a church event, and then just spend all night like doing school. And that would happen often. And my parents knew about it and they would like support it. Like they were fine with it. They didn't like love it, but they would also know about it and not care.
Yeah.
Because I think they did know that like it was kind of their fault that I was like having to do these all nighters and they did not want to like touch it.
I guess my follow up to that is like, so let's say someone comes to you and they're thinking about homeschooling their kids and they're like, okay, Julius, tell me about, I mean, you've already shared with us a lot of your homeschool experience, but like,
Right.
I'm thinking about doing this. What are some things that I should be thinking about, or maybe that I could do differently that like just, what are you going to say to them when they're coming to you kind of just being
Yeah.
like, where do I look for this?
Yeah. I would say if you are planning on homeschooling your kids, make sure that you have developmentally appropriate support systems for your child. And then at the time that they are old enough to make a choice about their life, let them make that choice. Because there are times I wish that I would have just been able to make the choice to go to like a real high school during my high school years. I think that could have been really beneficial to me. And I think that that is also tied into the age appropriate like support system, because as your child gets older and becomes a teenager and like just becomes their own person, they need experiences outside of the house. It is very important for that to happen. And if you don't provide that for them in a safe space, then they're going to find it themselves, and it will not be a safe space, and it will not be good for you and or for your kid. So I would say if they're old enough to make a choice, let them make the choice of being homeschooled or not. And then if they do choose to be homeschooled, provide them with the support systems that they need and the outside experiences, because even though like during ages 1 to 5 you are your child's whole world, you are not going to be that forever. You will be very disappointed when they turn 18 and move out, and you're not their whole worlds anymore. Like you tried to construct like this whole bubble where you were their whole world and like you curated everything, and you will be very disappointed and you will take it out on your kid or on yourself, and it's just not going to be beneficial to you in the long run. So just having that space between like I am not the end all be all for my child, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's like wonderfully put. And the things that I glean off of that is just honestly like I've had some people on before where we've talked about the ability for a homeschool parent to separate like mom and dad from the teacher, and in your case then also from the pastor. So like
Yes, yeah.
a third chunk there, because most parents, even the ones who unfortunately like are just terrible as homeschool parents, a lot of them, it stems from a place of they want their child to have a great education and they want their child to go
Yeah.
very far in life. And I don't think that, I'm not going to say that there's not any, but I just think that most parents do. And I think what you're saying about when your child gets to a certain age, of course, you're going to make decisions for them of what could be best, but start to listen to
Mhm.
what is like working and not working for
Yeah.
them and make the adjustments necessary, because
Yeah.
maybe it is public school, or maybe it's a different curriculum, or maybe it's a, hey, we got to get this kid involved in some extracurricular stuff. It can
Right.
be
Yeah.
really minor stuff that just, yeah, changes the whole trajectory of everything.
Mhm.
And I'm thankful because I don't know that my parents maybe 100% did that correctly, but they did some
Right.
things right where I definitely, they listened to when I was like, okay, I really don't like this math. Like we did a Becca
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, I was just like, I don't like this. And they were like, okay,
Mhm.
then we're going to find something different, you know? And, and that worked, but yeah, it definitely was like a listening of like, and that was a lot of work for them too. You know what I mean? Like I think that's
Yeah.
why a lot of
Yeah.
parents sometimes just shove the, like, it's the same thing over and over because they're like, well, I've already made the decision. This is what it is. It's just an easy copy paste over and over and over, and it's like, but if it's not working, it's not, it's not going to be great.
And I do think in some respects my parents did that, but then also in some other ways they just copy and pasted a lot of things. And it just yeah, in the times that they listened it was really helpful, but when they didn't, it kind of harmed a lot of people. So yeah, I would say they did try in some areas, but then they also just didn't do it in some other areas that they weren't willing to bend on at all. Um, yeah, so kind of just unfortunate in those respects, but I'm glad in some parts they did listen because it did make my teen years easier to have those outlets. So yeah, I'm really grateful for that.
Well, and I'm glad that you've come out of it and like you know, you still have a love of learning, and I think that that's like crazy important. I think most of the homeschoolers I know, that was one of the things we all came out with, is like this love for learning still, and I think that's going to get you much further in life than basically any
Mhm.
other skill,
Yeah,
right? Because
yeah,
this longing to be like, okay, if I need to know something, I'm going to go figure it out. And so
mm.
so in that regards, your parents did well. Maybe all of the ways to get there were not great, um,
Yeah,
but but
yeah.
Julius, this has been amazing. I thank you again for coming on and sharing your story. Is there anything else that we missed, or a favorite homeschool memory that's popped in your brain while we've been talking, or anything? Is there any other little thing?
So a good homeschool memory, let me think. I would say growing up with my siblings was really great. I think that I am grateful for the closeness that me and my siblings have. And in the house and outside of the house now that we're all adults, I think that that is something that I really appreciate. Even though they may not have done like the best job with homeschooling, I do appreciate that all of us siblings like kind of banded together against that sometimes and for that at times. And I'm really grateful for that. And it's just a good memory to look back on, like the Christmases with my siblings and my schoolmates and my bullies all in one place.
Yeah.
No, yeah. So it's just great. I really appreciate like the closeness that me and my siblings have. Yeah, because there's a lot of us, and it's just good to feel really connected to them.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's the big family thing that I think, like, I'm gonna say I missed out on, of just that, like, there's so many that you just,
Mhm.
like, maybe it's the built-in best friend, or maybe it's the, whatever, but you have that closeness that's like, that's really cool. That's always been really cool, in my opinion, to see with some of the
Mhm.
larger families in my community, of just like, wow, like, they really get along, or they really, I don't know. So anyway,
Yeah. Well, and if you don't get along with one of them, you have like many other options to get along with.
that's the
So,
thing with only
yeah.
one sibling. When we get along really, really well. When we don't get
Mhm.
along, we don't get along at all. And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's very, yeah, it's very hot or cold, a lot of the times. But
Yeah.
you know,
I get
as,
you.
as
I
is
would not
relationships.
trade my big family for the world. I love them, all of my siblings, and I want the best for them all. And yeah, I'm very glad to have them.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your ex-homeschooler story with the community. I really appreciate it. And
Thank you.
yeah, and to the audience, I hope you guys liked it as well. If you did, do the things, right? Click the thumbs up, give the 5-star rating. Julius deserves it. And if you have any questions, feel free, shoot me an email at exhsclub@gmail.com, or shoot me a DM on Instagram, Threads, TikTok. I think that's all the places, at EXHS Club. And yeah, and I do my best to try to get back to each and every one of you. But yeah, this has been fun, and until next time, we'll see ya. All right, peace.